Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are around the world. This is Friday Drinks, brought to you by ZFN, and thank you very much for joining us. And today it's a different sponsor. What is actually happening? Maybe you want to shed a bit of light?
No, thanks so much, Mkanya. So today's show is sponsored by our friends at Bank ABC. So they've come on board, and we look forward to some exciting episodes with them. So, we have had a financial institution before. It's good to have, someone from that sector again. And as you can see, we are.
They're dressing us well, and the cup, they even provide proper mugs.
Yes, well, it's not exactly a whiskey tumbler, but I'm happy to find something.
Yeah. Well, we're having a concoction, and this is the proper mug for a concoction. What are you actually having?
I'm having a whiskey today from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society of South Africa. One of my favorite flavor profiles, sweet and smoky. They're very colorful with their names and labels, and this one is called Sing Thy Name.
Sing Thy Name.
Yes, okay. Sing Thy Name.
That is what happens when you are up there, right? After 2 or 3 glasses.
Well, so
okay,
yeah,
Fantastic. Maybe we can actually start with the World Cup. I think Portugal is out. Is it out?
Portugal is out. I think they've been out
for a minute. I think you're behind the curve a little bit there,
okay.
Kanya.
Well, I do know that England is also out.
England is also out.
Okay,
yeah,
they went back home.
Yeah, so
and they left the cup.
They were hoping.
Well,
to take it home.
they're still there because there's a third and fourth playoff.
Third place.
Okay. Yeah. So there'll be.
Nobody remembers the third and fourth.
Yes, it's not really.
Like they say, you don't win silver, you lose gold.
Yeah, but maybe tell us. Messi has been doing phenomenal stuff.
Oh yes,
and Argentina have progressed. It's Argentina and Spain.
Yeah.
Maybe just walk us through what's actually happening. Is it now settled that Messi is the greatest of all time?
You can't ignore what Messi has achieved. When you look at his exploits at this World Cup, or whether one is a big supporter or otherwise, I think if you are a football person and you're just looking at performance in the ground and also stats, he has done phenomenally well. You look at the other 10 players around him, they're good players, but they are nowhere near impressive like at that level. When you look at the teams that are out, England is the latest one, but also France and Belgium and etc. They had some very, very good individuals there. And Messi has managed to carry this Argentine side on his own. And from the last game they played against England, it looked like for a bit the English team was going to prevail. But, just Messi doing his magic from around the 70th minute, the game just changed its complexion. And he definitely is the greatest of them all.
Okay. Do you agree?
Look, I'm not going to take anything away from Messi. What I will add to what Ranga said is that I think the English coach made some tactical errors. They were ahead early, and I think they chose to defend, which was a strategic failure. And in the post-game analysis, that's one of the major things that a lot of the commentators were saying, that perhaps if he had stayed in the game trying to score more, the result would have been completely different. But you shouldn't be conservative at that level with so much time left on the clock.
Okay. And France, on paper they say that's the best team in the world. What actually happened there?
Oh, that's for me. That one was a major surprise. I didn't see that result. I thought, look, not taking anything away from Spain, who are a very good side, young, fast, and with some very good individuals in their team. But on paper, you're right, Kanya. It looked like France. It was it was for them to lose. But the game they played against Spain, I think tactically they were not up there. The team was not gelling. Even the top talents were not really showing. And I think it's credit to Spain. They had their game plan. They had a proper game plan, and they knew how to deal with the French, threats, especially in the last third, in the final third, where you had some very prolific forwards, Mbappe, Dembele, Due at some point, and those really good top class strikers. And now some people are just joking now that it's difficult to tell. So if you are pro Messi, it means you probably align with the Barcelona philosophy. So you can't choose between the two of them. It's Spain, Argentina. But I think the way to look at it, even from neutrals, these are, I think we've seen more than 100 games, and for this team to still be standing and having to fight each other in the final, I think we have to give credit to them, regardless of your allegiances. So I was rooting for Spain and for Portugal. Yeah, I know you're going to just correct me. And when they went away prematurely, I shifted my allegiance to France. They're gone. So in this final, really...
Are you going to be wrong 3 times in a row? Who are you rooting for in the final?
Well, were you rooting for?
No, I'm not rooting for anyone.
Okay.
I would say it's different sides of one coin. So heads I lose, tail I lose.
Okay.
Either way.
Okay. I'm rooting for Spain.
You're rooting for Spain.
Yeah.
What does it actually say about Spanish football? I mean, they've really been dominating over the last 2 decades or so.
Look, I think, the analogy that...
And when I say Spanish, I mean even Argentina, that's still... they're the colonial masters.
Well, a lot of the players for that team
Latin America,
play in Europe. But I think, one of the comments that I saw a lot after the game was that they played like Barcelona. And Barcelona is famous for that beautiful, fluid soccer where they retain possession and literally almost pass it into the goal. So they, in as much as in the match between them and France, they didn't have any of the as many big names, in terms of the giants of the game today. They gelled more as a team and they played, beautifully.
So why do you think they will win? Is it because you love Spain more, or you hate Argentina more?
Oh no, there's no hate involved here. I think I like their style of play. I think they play a beautiful form of the game, and look, it's going to be a fantastic spectacle, whoever wins, because I think Messi brings something special and magical and extra to the game that, and then they're playing this team that has been playing really well the last few games. So I think it's going to be a fantastic spectacle, and whoever wins, I don't think I'm going to be heartbroken.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you may have come across some picture that was doing rounds on social media. So some
Messi and Lamar.
Messi and Lamar, where almost 19 years ago, they featured in an advert where Messi was bathing a barely 1 year old. I mean, so sweet, isn't it? And I think it would be great to just see how this beautiful story ends, whether it ends with the master or the student.
I think it's just the way they just sensationalize the final. It's good TV, so that's why they probably have it. But I was interested into hear your views on the new format. So you have 48 teams going to the World Cup. Is this a success for FIFA? And then there's talk of actually increasing that to 60.
To 64, yeah.
Yeah, 64. What are your thoughts, and do you think this was a success?
It was a success. I was a bit worried because when the number was increased, for a minute, I thought maybe it could sort of dilute the quality of football that was going to be on display. But I watched most of the group stages, and from day one, the matches were just electric. And the performance from our small teams, we also what they did, where even some of the top two teams that are going into the final, whether it was Argentina or Spain, somehow they found playing against small teams very, very difficult. Argentina struggled against Cape Verde, and I think Spain also had an all draw against Cape Verde. And it just tells you the quality of football which is there. So I think it's success. The move to try and get it to 64, we'll see when it's actually implemented. But I think having 48 teams was good. And, watching more than 100 games, it was really something.
So you watched more than 100 games?
I probably watched almost 80% of them.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And you? Did you
No, I didn't watch much of the group stages. I just waited for the quarterfinals and start. That's when I got engaged. But I think as a spectacle, ahead of
this increase, from 48 games to 60
it's
games.
clearly succeeded. I think there was a lot of the naysayers were saying, you're not going to get the numbers in the stadiums. You're not going to get the numbers actually traveling to that part of the world.
And watching.
But the results are in, and this World Cup had record visitors. It had record attendance at these huge NFL stadiums.
And
which are
people
much
actually
bigger
watching
than,
the game.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about over 3 billion people watching. Just one game.
Yeah. Obviously, there's also the unsaid attraction of the hosts themselves. Everyone wants to go to America. In fact, there are more people that were turned away that could not get visas. But imagine if the visa application or review process was not that stringent. I think this was going.
The numbers will be bigger still.
The numbers are going to be big. And you are very right, Shumba, because even some of the insignificant matches, if you could put it that way, one small team playing against another small team, there were still big numbers. They are showing up. And I mean, the team spirit and the support and everything was unbelievable from the fans. We didn't hear anything in terms of any problems, whether in accessing the stadium or in the supporters and things like that. So it was really very jovial and all.
Well, phenomenal. Let's hear from you guys. What do you actually think? Who's going to actually win the World Cup, and which team are you supporting? Is your team still there? Or, like many of us, we are only bystanders and we're watching as the greatest game in the world ever comes to a conclusion? But I would say it was a successful hosting by the Americans and the Mexicans and the Canadians. We forget this. It was 3 countries that actually hosted it. And kudos to FIFA actually for increasing the numbers to 48. I think that it's a world spectacle. And it's something that we are definitely looking forward to in 2013. Will Ronaldo still be there? Will Messi still be there? I think they will. Many of our viewers may forget this, but you used to remember in Cameroon, we used to have this chap, I think it's 1998, Roger Miller.
In 1990. 1990. Yeah, at 42.
I think it was 44.
Yeah. In his 40s.
And he was a super sub.
Yeah, definitely. But looking at how Messi has been performing, I think at this point anything is possible, eh? And for the 2030, Portugal is going to be one of the hosts. I think there's Portugal, there's Morocco and Spain, and then there will be other 3 hosts as well in different parts of the world. It would have been good if the great Cristiano was there to grace at least the opening match in Portugal. But look, the way I look at it is having these guys, Messi and Cristiano, it's been such a blessing for all football lovers. And I think we have to enjoy it while it lasts, because who knows? There will still be great players, but there won't be any other Messi.
Let's get as much as we can from them. But yeah, let's hear your thoughts and your views on this. So, gentlemen, a number of issues that we need to talk to. Sorry? Oh, okay. So I'm just being warned that we need an advert. So maybe let's join us in the next segment, and let's hear actually from our new sponsors, Bank ABC. Thank you very much, Bank ABC. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much to Bank ABC. I'm certainly opening an account with Bank ABC. What are you guys going to do?
The same, obviously.
Well, I've been a fan of Bank BC from so many days. I think it was always one of the briefings that I would not miss.
I remember those days.
Yes, yeah.
Back in the days when they moved to
the
Bank ABC building.
head office.
The gallery.
Yeah. It's a beautiful auditorium, but also the conversation, the hospitality was next to...
It was top notch.
Top-notch,
I certainly had
so
many good times there.
We have enjoyed some very good relations with the people there over the years. The people who were there then and the guys who are running it. And now,
No, phenomenal. Well, thank you very much. And to guys at home, think about opening an account with Bank ABC and tell us what your experience is actually. And today's topic, we've got a number of topics, but I think the critical one that I want us to discuss, it has to do with O levels. This requirement, so education system in Zimbabwe, and the most important one being for you to qualify or to be deemed to have passed your O levels, you need to have, so this is the ZimSec O levels, you need to have 5 O level subjects. So that you need to write at least 5 subjects and you need to have passed those 5 subjects. And because of that, for the last 46 years, our pass rate, and by pass rate, we mean those that have acquired at least the 5 requisite subjects, has been less than 30%. I think now it's hovering around 28%, but for the longest, for the last 46 years, it's actually been hovering around 22%, 23%. So most people fail, and by most we mean the great majority. More than 75% of people fail. But what's even more saddening is that over 90% of the people who write these exams from the rural areas actually fail. So you're looking at a significant number of people who are deemed to have failed and go around being deemed as failures because they didn't acquire the 5 O levels. Now, we obviously did a bit of background research on this, and it's quite clear that this was a system that was set up in 1951 in the UK. So this is a post-war labor child, and it was really created for the grammar schools. And I would say that the equivalent to grammar schools are your mission schools. So these are schools that require an entrance exam to get in, and then once you get in, regardless of where you come from, your financial background, so they're not exactly private schools, but they are grammar schools. These are your top-notch kids, and they're the ones who were supposed to write the O levels, and they're the ones who were supposed to then get the 5 O levels. And the requisite of 5 O levels was to actually gear you for A level and for university. So this was about 20% of the national population of the UK. They're the only ones who were supposed to write O levels, and then those are the ones who would progress to university because they would have taken the academic route. That's really the background. 80% didn't write O levels, and 5 O levels was not requisite. But as usual, with all things colonial, we take them, and here we are, 46 years later, and it's a requisite that you must have 5 O levels. And now to even go to A level, some schools actually demand that you have 5 A's, not just 5 O levels. Even when you recruit, maybe you can tell us, and I'll tell you a little anecdote story of how we recruit. But a very interesting one is most businesses actually recruit saying we need 5 O levels, minimum 5 O levels. And again, it's anecdotal, but it's a funny one that for a lot of people, even for their domestic help,
They want
require
5 O levels.
5 O levels. Right? So one could say it's a way of sifting through and getting the best screening mechanism. But as our good friend Memory has actually showed us using empirical data, that actually it doesn't hold. Work success is not determined by whether or not you have 5 O levels.
Yep.
So I just want us. Obviously, we don't have the answers. But I just want us to really talk about this because there's something that we are all very passionate about, something that the government has already started going with, which is rural industrialization. How do we get the rural sector or the rural farming land to be industrialized? And one ingredient is actually labor. And you've got this litany of people that you've considered failures because they don't have 5 O levels. So first, I want to actually just start from a philosophical perspective. And maybe, Shumba, you can help us here. Do you think it's valid to actually say 5 O levels, just from a philosophical perspective?
No, definitely not. I mean, I think, historically, and I think you did a very good job of articulating the historical context of where we got O levels in the first instance and this number of 5 O levels. And when you look at the way we do business in this part of the world, in terms of ideologically, right, setting these standards and thinking about education policy broadly, right, we tend to look at what happened or the setup that the colonial master had, and then we just, without being particularly thoughtful, adopt it as a standard. So I think if somebody was to start with a blank piece of paper and imagine what kind of educational infrastructure best suits Zimbabwe, given where we are as an economy today, they would come up with something that looks very different from O levels and 5 O levels. So I think, and the world has changed so much since 1980 and 1951. And I think it's clear that many of these students would be better served taking artisanal vocations where they start at being apprentices in certain skills and learning by doing, without a focus on the academic side of things. For example, you just spoke about rural agriculture, right? Many of these individuals are probably better off spending some time in some sort of agricultural institution that teaches the basics of how to actually best practices in agronomy for a small-scale subsistence farming to make them much more productive. If you actually think about the rural areas where we have most of the subsistence farmers, their yields per hectare of maize, for example, are less than 1 ton, right? And that's a function of their agronomy, right? Their understanding of best practices and how to make the land productive. So if some of the energy that is perhaps not getting the outcomes that we would like in formal education through this O-level process is channeled to something that's much more relevant and pragmatic for them, we would have much better outcome.
Okay, I tend to agree and sympathize with your view, but Zia, maybe walk us through, just because as an employer and having lived in these communities and having done very well, and primarily because you were the one geared for this schooling system that I'm sure you have your 5-4 levels.
Do I? I'll check.
But just walk us through what you would do. And first of all, I just want to start from a very philosophical perspective. How psychological damaging is it for us as a society to call these people failures because they didn't get 5-4 levels?
Yeah, so when you look at it, the biggest problem for me is we created a system that is more one size fits all. So we are assuming that this is the only way we can be able to determine the success or failure of a certain child, as they go through the schooling system. But I think it's actually different from even the way we used to live our lives as, even before the colonialists came. Because then we had, Wavimi, Urudza, or guys who were doing all kind of things, right? And people were just becoming, people had actually capacity to become, to do very well in their specific area. And it didn't necessarily follow that there was one person that could pretty much do everything. Maybe the system, the way you have articulated, I didn't know about that history, that why it was necessary. But when you try and apply it in our environment, the fact that we keep getting this low all-level pass rate at below 30%, it just tells you that it's actually a failing system. The system itself has got problem, and it's actually the cause for these failures that we see. Because if you then look at the outcomes, maybe you fast forward 15, 20 years down the line, that system has, I don't think there's enough evidence to suggest that it has got the predictive capacity in terms of pointing lifetime success. And in fact, if you look around in Zim right now, you're most likely to see the opposite. That there are people that may not have been very good with their books, or they can't put even 2-3 O levels for you there. But I think the lifetime success and generally outcomes in life, they found a way of doing certain things, and they've succeeded in them. And so I think that is the biggest problem. And the fact that the numbers also, success or failure, is directly related or linked to the social standing of these people, like you're giving the example of the rural people. It doesn't necessarily follow that your IQ is low, because you're in the rural area. It also just tells you that there are resource-related issues that could affect your success or failure with O level. So it means in that situation, it means you have condemned those ones who are in those resource-constrained areas into failure. Yet they can do a lot of things, things that are of a practical nature, So whether it's in agriculture that you have referenced to, but also carpentry, woodwork. I know we have got a history of what they used to call the Bantu education system that was really focused on practical education. It probably had its own issues, but I think the thinking of training people, giving someone an option to work using, giving them some sort of an option in addition to the academic pathway, I think that is probably what we have to have, where we have got two pathways where kids or children have to choose, depending on their capabilities, whether they want to pursue the academic pathway or they want to pursue the skills-based pathway.
Vocational or technical. So
exactly.
Three
and then we measure success on that basis. So if someone has done very well in their agriculture, they have passed. They didn't have to know any math, at least, beyond the math that's required in calculating how much fertilizer do you have to apply and so on and so forth. So the evidence on the ground really doesn't really support this system. And we will keep in carrying this. And the psychological impact of, yes, having all these people, 70% every exam period that are failing, we are basically condemning them. as a society.
Yeah, and also I think there's a failure, philosophically in this idea that you can, at a national level, have a top-down plan or solution for education. Because what happens is, with all these abysmal results that we've had over the last several years, the people who are really punishing and condemning are the students who are left behind, right? Because they're at a school that is poorly resourced, and it's almost impossible for them, regardless of their potential, to do well, right? And the bureaucrats who are managing this infrastructure, it doesn't matter whether the pass rate is high or low. We don't hear like wholesale changes happening because you've had a particularly bad year, or you don't hear about people being rewarded when they turn things around. There's a disconnect between the actual results of the students and whether the bureaucrats running the infrastructure are rewarded or punished. So I think there's scope to think about the incentive structure and how to make a bunch of changes. There's something that I picked up in the world of philanthropy vis-a-vis education, where so they were looking at how do you incentivize schools to get better outcomes, and one of them, and interestingly, the incentive that worked the best was to say, look, we're going to look at the salaries of your graduates, in the years after they leave your institution. The higher they are, the higher we will give to you to increase, to support any of your programs, right? Because previously the incentive was the more students you graduate, the more money we give you, right? So the incentive, the institution would just game the grading system. They would have many more graduates, but they've got their diplomas have no value in the market. They're not particularly attractive to employers, and so they realized they were incentivizing the wrong thing, and they changed to, let's look at what the market actually pays for these graduates, and we'll incentivize you based on that. So I think there's scope for us to think about incentives for these schools and the infrastructure in terms of the outcomes that we actually want to see in the real world.
So actually, when you look at the GCSE and the ZIMSEC levels, that the history is it was always meant for 20% of the students. Your brightest 20%.
And the numbers also confirming that. That's
The
why
numbers
you
are
have those kind of
That's
pass
why
rates.
it has always consistently in Zimbabwe been 22% who actually get the 5-4 levels. So it's not that everyone else has failed. We now, as the users of these examining bodies, we've now created this strata that if you don't have 5-4 levels, therefore you have failed. Again, thanks to a lot of people that have been commenting on X around this. But I found this very interesting, that you could have a kid who writes 4 levels and passes 4 subjects. They're deemed a failure. And yet, in terms of competence and in terms of IQ, they could actually be way better than everybody. But in Zimbabwe, which is actually very interesting, and you're looking at incentives, where we are not looking at it closely, especially as policymakers, is that it has actually now started affecting our literacy rates because people are dropping out. Because why would you channel your energies around writing these subjects when you know clearly you're going to fail? And number 2, when you know that you don't have enough money to even write. So what ends up happening is actually half our students are dropping out. And when they drop out, they're also missing the other ingredient of just pure literacy and numeracy, which is quite critical in our education system. Now, I want to zero in on this issue of competence, that a schooling system, even before 1951, and everywhere in India, in China, in America, because you have You have a diploma, a high school diploma. That's all you have. And a high school diploma is purely rated on competence. You have matriculated. That's why in South Africa they have the matriculation. The whole idea is you've gone through a certain rigor and you have a certain competence. And as long as you have a certain competence, you've passed. Because that's really what we want. And then if you want to go to university, very well, that's the academic pathway. Then let's put you through rigor. You must have 5 or 10 or 20. I don't know how many O levels you have, because that's the pathway you have chosen, which is very academic. And that is true in America. That's true in China, true in India, true everywhere around the world. Yet in Zimbabwe, we want to make everyone an academic.
Yeah, so look, I think I don't know if you guys have been following. There have been attempts to try and reform our education system. So right now they're implementing what is called the heritage-based curriculum. Yeah, and that a key feature of that is it's creating those pathways where I think at our level, maybe from Form 3 thereabouts, a learner will have to choose based on their competence or the capacity to undertake certain programs, either to go through, take the academics route or the skills-based route. And I saw a bit of that where, you could have a class of, like so many years ago when we were kids, in our class, we'd have to choose one practical. In fact, it was called compulsory. So either you're doing agriculture or building. And I know in my year, everyone passed building, right? So each one of us was assured of at least an O-level pass. And I think we didn't have a C. It was even a B or an A in building studies. And that really, it told me that it sort of opened my eyes in terms of understanding that, you know what, someone may not be very good with this rigorous academic pursuit, but maybe if you give them something, they will do well in it. And I think some of my colleagues, if they're doing very well as artisans, whether as carpenters or whatever, as a result of that. And I think there's actually a case to be made to say, you need to give these kids these options for them to do something that is practical. And like I've said, you just let the system create sort of pathways on its own. The ones that are really, really sharp and that can actually undertake the rigor of academics, you let them go into that space. Others that feel, and I think even way before independence, because I went to a school which used to be called this technical high school. I didn't quite understand why it was like that, but I think when I tried to reflect back, it was because the school was more focused on equipping the kids with the technical know-how as opposed to the academic rigor which is required. And you sort of have that kind of system, although it was not that pronounced, because you'd know that if you go to a Kutama or a Guinea or whatever, they're going to pound you with this, it's academic after academic. And then you go to some schools, you go to, say, Chechu or PE, sports excellence and whatever. And it's actually very good if you could create centers of excellence in particular kind of thing. So if it's an agricultural region, let's say somewhere in Marsh West, why can't we have agriculture being the preeminent kind of subject? We got some other area, whether it's Matebeleland or Manicaland.
It's a mining.
It's a mining area.
So
you get the
competence.
kids being exposed to these things at the very stage.
So it becomes mining.
Yes.
It could be building.
And if they do very well, you can't call them a failure because it's
they get a competence
they get
certificate.
in something.
By the time they get to 16, what they get is a competence certificate. So yes, they do have maths, English, and everything, but the core, instead of it being an option, the core subject is actually agriculture.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I also think it's part of the challenge, and if I'm hearing Zia correctly, is that it's a one-size-fits-all policy, right? Being set by bureaucrats in the Ministry of Education, whereas what would actually be more fit for purpose is if the communities are making those calls to say, well, in this part of the world, there's this huge mine, and it probably makes more sense for many of the kids to learn, to lean more into learning about mining, because this is the most likely place that they're going to get employment and advancement. And maybe have a conversation with the mine in that community to say, what skills do you want to see in your future employees? And you have a collaboration between the schools in that community and the biggest employers, and they figure out what's the best curriculum, at what level, how technical should they get, should they be studying until they're 16, 18, or do they need to advance to university? And that conversation is not happening at a national level. It's happening at a community
level.
It's happening.
I totally agree. And perhaps even the mines should start by scrapping this idea of 5-4 levels. That's number one. Number two, the irony is they end up employing people from Harare. And they drive them all the way into these local communities because the people in the local communities don't have 5-4 levels. So that's really where I was coming from. It's like you have a mine that's in Chipinge, for example. I don't want to, or...
Oh, there are no mines in Chipinge, so it's okay.
There are more farms in Chipinge than mines. But that's
it was just an example. It was just an example. That,
There's everything in Chipinge.
Did you find it ironical that you have a big mine in Chipinge, and then it says, we want 5-4 levels. So nobody in the local community has the 5-4 levels. So they end up employing people from the city to come in because there is this thing that says 5-4 levels. And what do they need people to do? They need people to just dig. Very rudimentary things that people in the local communities, in Chipinge, where there's a big mine, or in Chiadzo, where there's a big mine, if the local community was geared towards that, which is a certain level of competence, that by the time you get to 16, you have a certain level of competence. And with that level of competence, you can come in, you can go underground, and you can dig. If it's a farming town, similarly. That way it means that's the industrialization we're talking about, because then it's quite easy to absorb the local communities in the industry. So anyway, let's hear another word from our sponsors, and then let's take this discussion a little further. I think that, this is a rabbit hole session, so we can go a little bit further, but let's now look at it from industry perspective. Guys who are actually employing people. Do we also need to change our mindsets as employers? Join us in the next segment. Thank you very much and welcome back, and thank you very much to Banke BC for that word. And let's get back into it. So let's actually start with Chipinge, because I think we used Chipinge as an example, but let's actually be more practical with Chipinge. We know that there are big estates in Chipinge. We know that they want 5-4 levels. Can you maybe just give us a bit of color what actually happens and how the local communities are actually not benefiting from those big estates in Chipinge?
Yeah, so Chipinge obviously is a big agricultural hub. So tea, coffee, sugarcane, cotton, and wheat. So there are these big estates that are there. So every now and then, every year, they are recruiting for artisans, apprenticeships, and etc. And obviously, this is not their problem, but that it's actually a national requirement that for you to do an apprenticeship program, you need to have 5 O-levels. In fact, they can even go deeper to say your 5 O-levels must not include practical subjects. And then they name them one by one, whether it's woodwork, building, and whatever. So what tended to happen was because generally it's harder for a rural kid to pass this O-level. I think when you look at the statistics, the majority of those that actually are in the 70% that fail are probably in the rural areas for one reason or another, not because of IQ-related issues, maybe resources and etc. So year in, year out, these organizations would recruit people from all over, or mostly urban, or that may have gone through the mission schools, because I think the numbers are much higher in mission schools in terms of the pass rates. So consistently, you'd have the artisans, coming from
Harare.
Whether it's Blue or from other towns. Not that it's not good, but if you have got a system that almost always is discriminating against the local people simply on the basis of this 5 O-level, that's very... I think that's not really the way we need to develop.
Yeah, it's quite problematic.
It's quite problematic. Yeah. And you look around, I also just wanted to add another anecdote around, I've seen people that, they failed their O-level, they don't even have one subject. They go to South Africa. And a number of them, because when they go to South Africa, they are doing, technical work. Yeah. They are always coming back with that skill. Someone comes back knowing how to, like, building work or as a carpenter, to operate a machine. And that just tells you that, it didn't require 5 O-level. Because they went into an environment where they just said, okay, come, you want to learn. And if you look around and the level of workmanship, like if someone wants to do tiles, like, where did you learn this thing? I went to South Africa. That's the only thing that they say. I was doing this in South Africa. And they actually learned it on the job. So there are some of these, our vocations, technical spaces that in Zim right now, for you to get in their training, you need O-levels. Yet someone can just learn them on the job, and they can do them much better.
I mean, now even to become a general hand in this estate, you need 5 O-levels. And that's ridiculous because people in the community don't have those 5 O-levels. And again, we will quote our member Ngui, who clearly showed us that having 5 O-levels is not a requisite to success, work success. In fact, there are other ways in which you can measure success. And I'm pretty sure that the rural folk will be able to do very well in those. So I think that what we're advocating for is some level of competence-based system, that at 16, you should just be competent enough. And if you're competent enough, then we can train you into, different pathways. If you're very academic, then yes, like Shumba, you go through the academic rigor. That's perfectly fine. Kudos to you and well done. But if you're technical, you're not a failure. And I think this is something that really I'm very passionate about, that I think that there are lots of people in the rural areas who are considered failures or who end up not writing O-levels because they can clearly see. You know that in grade 7, I think you must have something like 36 points or something like that. And if anything above 36 points is considered a failure. Now, imagine you have, 60-something points in grade 7.
I don't know if they get that number, but
whatever it is. Like, why would you continue with education?
Those numbers sounded obscenely high.
Well, I don't know the actual, but there's a cutoff in which they will consider that as a pass, and then beyond that they're like, Shamare, no problem. Well, actually, it turns out you don't have a problem. You're just not academically inclined. But this, as you quite rightly say, that you go to South Africa, they teach you competence, you become very competent in that one thing. Because the whole idea of education, especially the academic rigor, was for you to be holistic. So even this heritage, I've got many issues with the heritage based, because the whole idea is one size fits all. Is this idea that we can create an individual who's a polymath, who understands maths, who understands English, who understands Shona, who understands, Tsumo, and understands science. And we've created, a perfect human being. But that's as far as academia is concerned. Certainly that's not as far as the technical fit and turner job or journeyman is concerned. And I have a problem with that. So we know big miners. Should they really be recruiting based on 5-4 levels?
No, of course not. I mean, look.
So why haven't they changed?
Clearly, I think this is a feature of corporate Zimbabwe. I think it's conservative. I think that they're set in their ways. You'll have. I'm sure there are corporates that are 50 years old plus, and they have these manuals about how to do things that are decades old, and we're just not given to being very dynamic and aggressive about making changes. In fact, that's the other challenge as well, and this is like more of a business, old corporate businesses run by professional managers versus new businesses run by founder entrepreneurs, right? Managers are much less likely to shake things up and rethink, the business from the ground up. And unfortunately, because of the regulatory environment, in the formal sector, the level of regulation on average is quite high. So the downside risk of you shaking things up and then running afoul of a regulator and your board and some of your compliance people is quite high. So we're not as dynamic, we're not as adventurous, we don't explore different ways of doing things as aggressively as we otherwise would. So you'll find you'll have the same processes and systems and way of thinking for decades. And so it's good that we're having this conversation, because perhaps some in our audience are going to actually take this back to their boardrooms, to their executive committees, and rethink the way they do some things.
Yeah, I don't know if there has been an attempt by the authorities to try and analyze or track what happens to all those 70% that are always, that are failing the O-level every year, and say, what have we done? And obviously, as a society, we have got a responsibility to
Most of them have gone to South Africa.
Most of them have got...
and they're actually part of the remittances. So it turns out they're not failures. They're actually supporting the guy who with 5 O-levels went on to do a degree.
Was unemployed.
And he's unemployed.
So it's an opportunity for us to actually change this system, because it's not working. But I know how difficult it is, like what Shumba has already articulated, that someone is using a manual from probably 50 years ago. They don't quite understand why they have to do that. And also, there has not been an attempt even by corporate themselves to try and measure the performance and say, okay, just do an experiment and say, okay, does it really? So when you are hiring a general hand and you are using 5 O-levels as a screening mechanism, has there been
your outcomes?
I'll tell you a fun anecdote. I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but I know. I have a friend in HR, and they advertised for a position, and all they wanted was this standard, right? 5 O-levels. And because of the unemployment situation in Zimbabwe, as they were screening applications, they noticed that they had so many applicants who had A-levels, not just 5 O-levels. So they just said, look, the guys who just have 5 O-levels, let's do away with their applications. And as they did further screening, they realized that there were applicants with degrees. So they decided, you know what, the applicants who just had A-levels, let's do away with those guys. And because they got so many applications, right? So as they did further screening, they realized that amongst the applicants with degrees, some of them actually have master's degrees. And this is for a cashier's position. That I can disclose, And but the scourge of unemployment is so high that you have people with degrees, with master's degrees, applying for a job as a cashier.
Sounds like Nigeria.
and perhaps that's where one of our problem is that we keep churning out these university graduates. In fact, if the authorities were really to sit down and analyze the whole system, I think it would just make sense to just collapse the degree system or the university system into only those the 20%. I don't know what number.
Yes,
it
20%.
remains. Yeah, that remains at A level and something like that are the ones that should be pushed into this maybe academic route. But for the rest of the guys, they should learn some trade. And I think if along the way they decide to to have a degree, you can still do that, because someone can go through, learn a trade, get a national certificate, and if they think that maybe, okay, fine, I'm very good with my hands, but I need to get something extra, do an ND, higher national diploma, and a degree. But what it does is it deals with this problem that we have got so many university graduates to a point and there is not enough jobs for them, and yet because of unemployment, obviously, I can just imagine as a recruiter that when I'm recruiting for that, say maybe a clerk position, and I want 5 O levels. Obviously, it puts me in a dilemma if I see someone with A level and with a degree. And
why does it put you in a dilemma?
Because
this is what memory has been hammering hard on.
So the thing
just because somebody is overqualified has nothing to do with the actual job description. If this is what we want.
So you see what will then happen at the back of my mind will be like, maybe I may have to incentivize this person that is taking it even higher. They're just looking for a job. So if I have to give it,
why would you change the remuneration because of the qualifications?
I won't change the remuneration. I'll just keep the remuneration as it is. But for my screening,
But memory is continuously telling us that actually that is the worst outcome.
So I've got this idea.
It is definitely, because the person will be grumpy. Look, they've got a drink. They've got a
not
degree,
necessarily if they're applying for that job, but anyway.
No. They might be applying for it just.
But the minute they get in,
the minute they get in, they don't want it.
So one of the things that I think is fundamentally different between something like, say, one of these things that people value highly socially, for example, healthcare. One of the differences between healthcare and education, I think education is an investment, right? And if you accept that premise, then you should hold every institution. You should. That's the bar that you should test them on in terms of, are they creative? Are they making a positive contribution to the students that go through them, or not? To say, so you should be able to measure the cost of putting a child through or a student through a particular level of education, and the institution for it to, if it's government funded, my idea is it should track the people who graduate, and to the extent that and tag a cost to their education, and to the extent that they get employed or find themselves productive in the marketplace and able to generate income, they should be able to pay back the cost. And if they are unable to, then there's something wrong. That should be a red flag, and that's.
We already know. We know the stats. They are unemployed.
So that's really what we should. That's the data that we should collect and use to interrogate.
We don't need to. We already know the data. They're unemployed, and I can give you a very interesting data because there's the data I actually work with, and for over 12, 13 years, close to 15 years, is, do you know the institution that South African companies or industry likes the most in Zimbabwe? Do you know which institution?
No idea.
None.
Harare Polytechnic. and Gweru and Bulawayo, the polytechnics.
Because they
Industry in
produce
South
people with
Africa
technical skills.
With technical skills. The same applies to Australia. Same applies to the UK. It's not the UZ, it's not NAST. It's guys with the technical skills. And this is data over the last 15 years. That if you have a technical skill from a polytechnic, you're more likely to get a job in South Africa and abroad to Australia or even to America. That's what's in demand. And yet we keep churning these people through the academic process. And, it's very possible that there's somebody who's passed 5 O-levels, but they're actually not academic, or they're not even interested in academia. But you force much them to do a degree that has absolutely no relevance. And then they're unemployed. Now, this is the irony. It's the guy in Chipinge who goes through this rigor of 5 O-levels, goes through to university, is now unemployed, and he's sitting in Chipinge, unemployed. Now, he's worse off because he's irrelevant in Chipinge. Because the economy in Chipinge doesn't need somebody like that.
Oh, we've got farms, so they can work on their farms.
They're entitled.
They can,
Remember, they've got a degree.
Yeah.
They can be
They're
a decreed
entitled.
cashier.
They're seriously entitled. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's have your views. Let's have your thoughts. Tell us what you guys think. Do you agree with us or do you disagree? If you vehemently disagree, please share your areas of disagreement.
Before you go, in summary, what are you suggesting?
Well, I think it's
What's
very...
the big takeaway? In fact, not suggesting, but the big takeaway.
Let's have a conversation. I think at this point in time, let's have the conversation. Please tag all the policymakers around this issue. Let's have a conversation around this.
He's being surprisingly politically correct.
Let's analyze even in industry that these people who need 5 O-levels, do we actually need 5 O-levels? And go on Memory Ngui's timeline, and you can clearly see he's been saying this for the last ever many years. And actually, 5 O-levels, it's irrelevant to whether or not your lifetime success or your work success. And he has other methods in which you can measure. So if you have job applications for the specific job, if you need somebody who's high in conscientiousness, there's a way in which you can measure conscientiousness. So if you want somebody who's a cashier and it's integrity that you're interested in, then there are ways in which you can measure integrity.
Mm-hmm. Which is not a master's degree.
It's certainly not a master's degree. Certainly not a master's degree. So there are ways in which we can do this. And I think, and those that are in the 20%, let's give them as much latitude as possible. If they want to do 25 subjects,
It's okay.
It's okay. It's
what is
not
the
a
idea
one-size-fits-all.
around limiting how many subjects you can write it at O level or at A level?
Because
if you're a polymath, if you're a genius, why should we hold you back?
Exactly. And I think it comes back to, if you really wanted a takeaway, is this idea, a very socialist idea of one size fits all.
That we're all the same, but
we're all
not
the same. We're not the same. And actually what we want is this process is actually helping us to ensure that the local communities are the ones that benefit the most. Whether you're in a mining town, then everybody in that mining town should be able to go through school and get some sort of competence around mining or competence around, agriculture or whatever it is in that particular area. Then you ensure that the local communities are absorbed in the industries that are there. That's the way we can quicken and heighten the industrialization. It also increases productivity. I think Shumba said something that was very, very, very critical, that our yield per hectare in terms of maize is less than one ton.
Yeah, it's
it's around 900.
So I did well.
Oh, you did more than 1 ton?
Yeah, of course.
Well, you used fertilizer, so that certainly helps. But our average it's lower than Malawi, lower than
it's around
Zambia.
0.7 tons per hectare.
There you go.
It's abysmal.
It's abysmal. But if people were trained in the local communities, we're just using and we increase the productivity.
But anyway, speaking about the industrialization of agriculture, I'll be remiss if I don't make the point that if we're actually serious about that, let's give the farmers proper title deeds.
Yeah. No, I think we've had a rabbit hole session around that. I think today was just really on labor and how we can actually increase labor productivity, especially in the era of AI and everything that's happening. Let's get people to be excited about this. If you don't get 5 O levels, this is my message to you. You're not a failure by any measure. Not at all. So, ladies and gentlemen, have yourself a wonderful Friday and a great weekend. Cheers.
Cheers.
And thanks to our friends at Benge BC. It's been a great one.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Don't get busy.
Friday evening, ice in the glass, mics on the table, laugh as we pass. Suit jacket open, tie in the pocket, charts on the coaster, phone by the docket. Talking Zim dollars, talking the rand, big global headlines, small sugar in hand. Friday drinks,